Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a video where I actually talk about some dark and spooky, creepy books for Halloween. I've decided to embrace the black and the pumpkin and talk about some books that creeped me out. I don't really read a lot of thriller or anything, but I like a bit of a shock every now and then. So I have a small list that I have curated for you. So without further ado, let's get into my first pick, and that is My Sister Rosa. This is a story that is contemporary. I think it's also young adult, but it has such a confronting relationship in it that just creeped me out. It's like the feeling of the little girl at the end of the bed, like she'd be 7 years old or something, and she's just standing over you and she's terrifying. That is the kind of fear that I associate with My Sister Rosa, mostly because the main character, his younger sister Rosa, he's convinced is a psychopath, and so you're investigating that through his perspective for the entire book, and it is really creepy. So if you want a spook that's not supernatural, but it's more psychological, I would read My Sister Rosa, because it's not too much of a stretch to wrap your mind around, because I could do it, and I don't really read a lot of the genre, like I said, so it's a really easy in. And I think it's also a pretty intriguing perspective as well, because it's young adult, and when I think of mystery, thriller, psychological stuff, I mostly think of adult opportunities in the genre and category rather than young adult, so I think this is a good thing to try. But then a straight up pivot into fantasy and apocalyptic stuff with a manga called Attack on Titan. People have talked a lot about this before, but it's essentially Japan but way in the future, and it's become a point where there are these monsters and the towns or the cities are trying to keep them out. So these monsters can be, a minimum of like 7 to 8 foot high, ranging to as tall as a skyscraper, and they eat people. So these people have built these incredible walls around them to keep all these monsters out. They don't always work though, and also the people have to survive and hunt for food. So you've got protagonists who go to like the soldier academies, but the mortality rate is not very high. So there's that intensity of trying to survive. There's also that supernatural element of these titans that they don't need humans for sustenance, but they keep eating them. So there's that mystery there, and there's the intensity of the main character, Eren. And so his name is literally Eren Yeager, which I think means hunter. So you get that intensity and that anger of the main character, plus the balancing out of his friend Armin, who is the smarter character. I've forgotten her name now because I haven't watched it for a while, but she is another friend of the trio, and she's the really, really intelligent one, Mikasa, and she's really quiet as well. So she's very driven and ruthless and quiet, and Armin is very intellectual, and then Eren's just angry. So you've got a fair bit of balance between the trio, and then obviously politics explodes. So it was a good story and it felt very action-packed. So if you want something that will keep you on the edge of your seat, spook you out, and make you worry about the main character's survival, I would recommend. There is a family of birds feeding each other just outside the window, and I don't know how long it's going to last. So I'm really sorry if you can hear all of their feeding noises, but I don't have the heart to shoo them away because they're magpies. And in Australia, if you annoy a magpie, you're going to get swooped for the rest of your life, and they draw blood. So I think I'd just rather let them do their thing. I don't want to get swooped. Also, as a recommendation, I've got the Villain Saga, so Vicious and Vengeful by Victoria Schwab. So Vicious is about Victor and Eli, and both of them initially went to university together, and they studied to try and find this extraordinary ability and tap into it, because the theory is that you can kind of make anyone a superhero, and then that thesis idea gets completely catapulted into oblivion when they do testing on each other, and they may or may not succeed. So there are interesting ramifications with these characters, because you get when they went to university together, and then you get 10 years in the future when they vehemently hate each other and they are basically enemies and want to kill each other. So it's an interesting dichotomy, to say the least. And it's also kind of spooky because the characters are morally grey and there are questionable choices made. And there's also some kind of supernatural element ability to it. Not necessarily spooky creature, but paranormal element. Oh, not even paranormal. It's just like if X-Men were bad. Basically, the concept is if you give people power, they're not going to do good things with it, and that's what this series really executes. Now we've got 2 more manga, so the 2 that I want to talk about are kind of similar. I feel like if you like one, you may like the other. I loved one and only kind of enjoyed the other, so do with that information what you will. The first one is Monster, and I read volumes 1 and 2 of this. It does continue beyond that though. And this one follows a doctor who realizes that a guy is a serial killer because he either catches him in the act or puts 2 and 2 together. And so this serial killer has outsmarted everyone previously, but this doctor has recognized it. So now it's become like a cat and mouse of this doctor trying to catch him, as far as I am aware. And I think there's a lot wrapped up at the beginning. And this doctor basically leaves his job to track this guy down. So literally a cat and mouse game. And then Death Note is very similar in the sense that it's also a cat and mouse game with a serial killer. So Light Yagami is the main character, but he is calling himself Kira, which sounds like killer to me. I don't know if that was intentional in the anime or the Japanese version. I don't know what Kira actually means, but Light is one day at university. He's so smart to the point where he's incredibly bored with his life because he's coasting, and he walks out and finds a death note on the ground. And this death note was actually dropped by a Shinigami, which is a death god, because the death god was bored and wanted to see what happened. So the death god wrote some instructions in the death note and said, if you do these things, you can cause the death of people. Light doesn't really believe it, because why would you believe what's written in some random notebook that's dropped outside of university? But he tries it out and people start dying. And so he takes it upon himself to start killing criminals. But at this point, what becomes the moral line? He is now a criminal because he's murdered people, even though he hasn't been physically present when he's doing it. So now he's being tracked down by L, who is a detective. And to kill people, Light needs their full name and their face. And L hides his face and his true name. So they have to kind of face off against each other without knowing who each other are, which is very fascinating. And it takes a lot of mental gymnastics. But even though some of the panels felt very wordy to me, I was still very gripped by this. And it's very much more a psychological thriller with a little bit of supernatural with the Shinigami, because only the people that have touched the Death Note can see the Shinigami. So Light obviously can see him, but nobody else can. So it looks like Light is also talking to himself and he's going a bit crazy. So he has to be careful. So it's a very dark series, and I very much love the way that the manga went rather than the anime. I feel like it felt a little bit diluted in the anime, even though it still got the main messages across. So I loved Death Note. Death Note is the one that I continued and I would love to reread. Monster's the one that I kind of put down. So if you're going to try either of them, do Death Note. Then we have another one that is also V.E. Schwab. She tends to write really atmospheric books, and she really captures the world and the characters within it. So this one is a middle grade book, and it's City of Ghosts. And I can't remember the protagonist's name, so I'm sorry. But, oh no, it just came to me, Cassidy Blake. Thank you, brain. Cassidy Blake is, I think, 10 or 11. And when she was a kid, or I mean younger than she is, she had an accident, fell off her bike into a lake, came close to death, and then Jacob, who is a ghost in that lake, pulled her back from the veil and brought her back to life again. And so because she had that brush with death and she's now come back, she can see ghosts. So that's why the first book is called The City of Ghosts, because she can see them and interact with them and cross through the veil, but it's becoming more and more dangerous for her, and there are multitudes of reasons why. And at the same time, she's figuring this out with Jacob, who is her best friend. She also realizes that her parents want to start this ghost TV show. Is it paranormal or not? One of them is a believer, one of them isn't, and neither of them know about Cassidy's ability to see ghosts. So they are going to all the different ghost capitals around the world and taking Cassidy with them. And Cassidy is like, this is too much, because she can literally step through the veil and experience all of these high intensity ghost vibes. So it is very spooky. And the second book in the series made me feel very claustrophobic, but it was very intentional. So I think the atmosphere, like I said, in V.E. Schwab's work is incredible. And even at that, I guess, the more diluted level where it's simplified, she still manages to keep that core of you empathizing with the character and building a story and building a world that is quite well developed, but keeping it to a shorthand so that younger readers can easily latch on. So I have a lot of respect for her for that, because it felt incredibly different to her Villain Saga, which is obviously written for adults, because of the subject matter. So both of them are spooky in their own ways, but one literally has ghosts, so maybe that one's more suited to reading around Halloween. We only have 2 left, and thank goodness, because the magpies outside are going bananas. Oh my god. I think birds is going to be the new thing in my house. Like, there's always birds around, which is absolutely lovely, but not so much when you need to film a video. But anyway, the next book is also a manga, and I watched some of the anime as well, and I found the anime easier to follow. So the manga is Dead Man Wonderland, and this does a rapid twist on that magical school vibe where our main character is, I guess he's set up to look like he's murdered his whole class of people. Obviously he didn't, but he's arrested and taken to this jail, and this jail is called Dead Man Wonderland. So it's kind of like, I guess I said magical school, but it's more like the Hunger Games in the sense that there is an arena and people need to fight for their food rations, I suppose. Otherwise they're going to die. They've got this thing in them that if they don't perform in Dead Man Wonderland and succeed and live at the end, they don't get this injection or this pill, and that means that they're going to die because they're all kind of on death row, I think. So it makes it incredibly intense, and it's not entirely not supernatural, I guess. The character that caused the murders is the Red Man. He's introduced at the very beginning. I don't know enough about him to tell you more, so this is all you will know going into it as well, so it's not a spoiler. The Red Man, or that creature or person that the main character encounters at the beginning, obviously has this supernatural kind of capacity for blood and blood manipulation. So there is a supernatural element to it, but not necessarily a supernatural creature. But it is hella spooky in the sense that characters are fighting literally tooth and nail to survive, and you can't trust anybody. And some weird shenanigans are also going on. So it's very dark, and I would encourage you to watch it if you want to be weirded out, intrigued, and sitting on the edge of your seat. And then Lucky Last is one of my favorite post-apocalyptic books ever. And even though usually I go for books with zombies, this is a post-apocalyptic book about a disease that wiped 99% of the population out. So it's not like there are zombies roaming free, but it's people that you need to worry about, survivors. So this woman who is a nurse, naturally Book of the Unnamed Midwife, she is a survivor of this plague, and she's dressed herself as a man to kind of pass in this world because only a very small percentile of women survive. And so if a man sees a woman out in the open, they're put up to a lot of danger and risk. So she presents as a man so that she can kind of pass and help the women that she encounters without attracting unwanted attention. So I really found that psychological aspect of presenting one way and feeling another and then being isolated for a long time. I found all of the ways that this book handled identity and internal voice really intriguing. And I think it'll be very beneficial for people to read, especially after COVID lockdowns, because there's an element there that I think we can all relate to of being stuck in your own head. And I think it's really valuable to read about, and I would really like to reread it. And it also ends in a way that's not doom and gloom, like there is an element of hope there. So even though it is about an apocalypse, it's not necessarily spooky and supernatural vibes, but it's more reflective. So I think it's a good one to read after you've done all your spooks and you want something a little bit dark but with a little bit of hope at the end, kind of just to see out October and Halloween. I think it's perfect. Initially I gave it 4 stars, and then upon reflection and kind of deeply thinking about it, I found that it really settled with me and I really respect it as well. So I loved it, 5 stars. I think you should read it too, because so many apocalyptic books get recommended and that one's not talked about enough. So do me a favor and add it to your TBR. But that is the end of this spooky video based on these books. If you think I would like anything, please recommend them down in the description below, because I'm in need of some spooky books that I feel would fit my reading taste, because I'm not a real crime and thriller kind of person. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.